For me personally, as a hockey fan, I don't really think it's a secret, but I don't know if I've talked about this as much. One of the biggest drafts in my lifetime was the 2015 NHL Entry Draft. Not only was this a draft where Connor McDavid went first overall and started his reign of terror across the NHL, but this also was the first draft where I personally paid so much attention to the prospects that it really kickstarted my love and affinity for scouting and paying attention to youth in hockey. This 2015 draft season was one that I loved, and I was only in grade 9 at the time, so there was a lot going on in my life. I was trying to grow up, I was trying to learn more about social stuff, I was trying to study, and I also did have a big family move in 2015. So, to balance all of that crazy life stuff with hockey and paying attention to the draft, it was a lot to take in for my 15-year-old mind. 14-year-old mind. Yeah, I turned 15 in the summer of that year. But anyways, the 2015 draft was filled with two guys at the top of everything that were going to dominate the NHL for years to come. And there was a little tiny bit of a debate as to whether or not there'd be a 1 versus 2 controversy, but ultimately, Connor McDavid went first overall over Jack Eichel. A lot of people would say that's the consensus because, hey, it was. And to their credit, I mean, McDavid has been McDavid, and Jack Eichel has also been very, very good. Now, sure, you can say some other guys underneath Eichel have been a tad better. Would you rather have Eichel or Marner, for example? Would you have Eichel or Rantanen, for example? But at the end of the day, Jack Eichel already has a Stanley Cup in his young career, and he has been doing very good things with the Vegas Golden Knights ever since being acquired over there. However, the third overall spot belonged to the Arizona Coyotes, and in this third spot they did not take Mitch Marner, Noah Hanifin, Werenski, Rantanen. They took none of these guys. Instead, the third overall picking Arizona Coyotes selected Connor McDavid's teammate in Dylan Strome of the Erie Otters. And unfortunately, for Strome and his development, he went through so many years of not being able to fully live up to that potential that ultimately you saw the Marners, the Hanifins, the Werenskis, the Rantanens, even the guys taken later on in the draft, the Barzals, the Bessers. You saw these guys inevitably take over Dylan Strome in prospect rankings and in NHL league play. Even Jake DeBrusk was better than Dylan Strome for a moment, because Strome, he was a big guy, he had 129 points in 68 games, he had a lesser point production the next season after McDavid left the Erie Otters, 111 points in 56 games, but what made Strome click in the OHL was his playmaking. Take that big frame of his, add on the hockey analyzing mind that he's got, add on some filthy hands, and you have Dylan Strome. And unfortunately, while there was a time where Strome was seen by some as the best NHL prospect, oh, he's going to be second or third behind Matthews and Laine in 2016, and then in 2017 people were saying he's still a better prospect than Nolan Patrick or Nico Hischier, and in 2018 they were still tossing his name in there behind Rasmus Dahlin and Heiskanen and everybody else. Dylan Strome didn't make the NHL full-time until 2018-19, where, with the Arizona Coyotes, he only had 6 points, but then he got traded over to Chicago, and he had 51 points in 58 games over there. He was always good in the AHL, even more so in the OHL, but man, did Dylan Strome not have himself a good NHL start to his career with the Coyotes organization. Things did not look good for him. Give it a few years, and Strome went from a near point-per-game guy in Chicago to getting half a point a game the few years after. He had 17 points in 40 games. Things were not looking all too great for Strome. And this is sort of where we started to say, around 2020, 2021, okay, McDavid is the best player in the league. Eichel is still going through Buffalo growing pains. There are a bunch of other guys from 2015 that have been exploding offensively and have been winning. Strome is not one of them. So he ends up going to Washington a few years later. He had a pretty good season with Chicago in 21-22, 48.69 games. But Strome gets sent over to Washington, and he starts playing well. Like 65 points, 81 games. The year after, he had 2 more assists, so 67 points in 82 games. The Caps went through a few years of not really having that much of an identity outside of Alex Ovechkin. There were some guys that were leaving the team, no more Nick Backstrom, no more Evgeny Kuznetsov, but last year when Dylan Strome led the team in points, it was sort of looking more like his team alongside of Alex Ovechkin. Not just Ovi anymore, but Ovi finding that center to finally mesh with and sort of reincarnate that spirit of Nick Backstrom. Now, in 2024-2025, Dylan Strome's career has taken the ultimate turn for the best. Because if you take a look at his overall record, in 14 games played, Dylan Strome has 22 points, 4 goals, 18 assists. He is on pace for roughly the same amount of goals in 23, but he's on pace for 105 assists on the season. Dylan Strome, everybody, is on pace for 128 points, which is finally living up to that potential that we saw all the way back in 2015. This guy is right up there with Alex Ovechkin, dominating the league and leading the team in points. Not only does Alex Ovechkin have 10 goals in 14 games, but Connor McMichael does too. And sure, I will say, McMichael and Ovechkin, they're totally different goal scorers, but Dylan Strome finding ways to feed Alex Ovechkin with these beautiful passes and making these reads and setting up Ovi in the side there for these one-timers on his way to beat Gretzky. Yeah, no, Dylan Strome is almost like that reincarnate of Nick Backstrom, oddly enough. And if you go over to the NHL as a whole, let's go over to NHL players and look at points from the 2015 NHL Entry Draft. You can see that while Dylan Strome is not the number one guy from that draft class in points this year, he's still pretty far up there with a 1.57 points per game. Take a look at it. He's beating Connor McDavid, he's beating Konechny, Marner, Rantanen, and the only guys that are above him are Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, and Kirill Kaprizov. Now, Kaprizov is like the other guy that nobody really talks about as a 2015 draft eligible because he was taken not in the first round. But Jack Eichel and Kyle Connor have been doing very well as well. However, Dylan Strome is third overall in 2015 draft class assists. He's above Marner, Rantanen, and everybody else. So Strome is right back in there. He's in the mix, and all of a sudden, that draft profile that we saw of Strome, Eichel, and McDavid, it's starting to look a lot more stable when you compare it to the conversations that we had all the way back in 2016 and 2017 when Eichel and McDavid were in the league and Strome was not, where there was always this sort of, I don't know if like jealousy is the right word, but there was this sort of angst amongst NHL and Arizona Coyotes fans that spoke about how, hey, we don't have a good player here. Our guy's taken too long to develop. He's not progressing. He's not looking good in the National Hockey League. There were moments throughout Dylan Strome's career as a developing prospect where the Coyotes totally mismanaged the way that he would play, and they didn't give him too much of an opportunity to be his best self. But now, it's 2024, the Capitals have given Strome that number one spot alongside of Ovechkin, and he's looking great. So, this is a miracle story in the making. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Dylan Strome and the way he's been able to revitalize his NHL career, how well he's been able to perform as a member of the Washington Capitals, and where you see everything going from here. We hadn't even spoken about the contract. Dylan Strome is making $5 million a year till the end of 27-28. That guy being on pace for 128 points, that's ridiculous. Now, he's not going to get 128 points. At least, I don't think he's going to. But still, there's a lot to love here out of Dylan Strome. Not just the player, but the story. The fact that he was able to come up from what was a disappointing draft story to potentially even being better than the guys taken underneath him, like Mitch Marner, or maybe Kyle Connor in some capacity if you're really able to push it there. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Dylan Strome and the crazy career he has had so far. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99 and bye.